The stars had never been kind to humanity for 300 years. Since the Valanthi Empire first discovered Earth and its primitive inhabitants, humans had been treated as children in a galaxy full of ancient giants. They were allowed to exist, allowed to trade, allowed to build their small colonies on worlds nobody else wanted, but they were never allowed to be equals. Commander Marcus Webb stood at the viewport of the diplomatic station. Watching the Valanthi ship approach with the same arrogance he had witnessed 1,000 times before, the alien vessel was beautiful in its own way. All curved lines and glowing energy fields, a testament to technology that humans could barely understand. Behind him, Ambassador Claire Donovan reviewed the latest trade agreement on her datapad, her face carefully neutral despite the anger burning in her eyes. "They want another 15% reduction in our fleet capacity," Claire said quietly. "And in exchange, they will graciously allow us to continue using the Nexus trade routes that half the galaxy uses for free."
Oh.
Marcus turned from the viewport. He was 52 years old. He had spent most of those years watching humanity bow and scrape before species who had never known true hardship. The Valanthi had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. The Dreth Confederacy had conquered 100 worlds before humans learned to make fire. Even the youngest species on the Galactic Council had been traveling between stars when humanity was still fighting with swords and spears in the Dreth raids? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Claire set down the datapad. "The Council has classified them as a regional dispute. They will not intervene." The Dreth had been attacking human colonies for 60 years. Not conquering them, not occupying them, just destroying them. They would appear in orbit, burn everything to ash, and disappear before any help could arrive. Thousands of humans had died. Entire communities had been erased from existence. And the mighty Galactic Council, that supposedly wise and benevolent assembly of elder races, had done nothing but express mild concern. Marcus thought about his sister, who had died on Colony 14 when the Dreth came. He thought about the children who would never grow up, the dreams that would never be fulfilled, the laughter that would never echo across those burned fields. And he thought about the council members who had looked at the death toll and shrugged their various shoulders. "One day," he said softly, "they will understand what a mistake they have made." Claire looked at him with eyes that held the same quiet fury. Perhaps that day is closer than they think. Far across the galaxy, on Earth itself, Admiral Patricia Cole sat in a bunker carved deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was cold and sterile, filled with screens showing data from every human colony in known space. Red dots marked the worlds that had gone silent in the past month. 3 more colonies, 200,000 people, gone without a trace. Lieutenant Kevin Marsh stood at attention nearby, waiting for orders he knew would never come through official channels. Patricia was 60 years old, a veteran of humanity's desperate attempts to build a place for themselves in a hostile universe. She had watched friends die and colonies burn, and she had been forced to smile at the very species who allowed it to happen. How long before they reached the inner colonies? She asked without looking up. Kevin checked his data. At current rates of escalation, 2 years, maybe less. 2 years. That was how long humanity had before the Dreth decided to stop playing with their food and finish the meal. And the Council would do nothing. They would issue statements of regret and call for diplomatic solutions while the last humans choked on the ashes of their civilization. Patricia finally looked up from the screens. Her eyes were cold, colder than the mountain stones surrounding them. "Convene the War Council. Every sector commander, full encryption." Kevin hesitated. He was young, barely 30, and he still believed in rules and treaties and the basic decency of the galaxy. "Admiral, the Council Treaty prohibits us from—" "I know what it prohibits." Patricia stood and walked to the main display, where Earth turned slowly in the darkness of space. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, drifting peacefully over a world that had survived so much. "We are not going to die quietly, Lieutenant. Humanity did not crawl out of the mud and reach the stars just to be exterminated by creatures who see us as entertainment." Kevin swallowed hard. "What are you planning?" Patricia smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "For the past 20 years, we have been preparing for this moment. Secret facilities, hidden weapons, technology we have stolen and improved beyond anything the Council knows about. We have been playing the role of the weak and humble humans, and they believed every word. Now we are going to show them who we really are. Across the colonies, in places hidden from Council surveillance, the preparations continued. On Mars, engineers worked on weapon systems that would tear through Volanthi shields like paper. On Europa, soldiers trained in combat techniques designed specifically to counter Dreth warriors. In the asteroid belts and on the dark sides of moons, factories produced ships that would never appear on any official registry. Dr. Samuel Price led a team of scientists on the Lunar Research Facility, officially studying agricultural technology. In reality, he had spent 15 years reverse engineering Volanthi shield generators and finding ways to make them stronger, faster, and completely undetectable. The aliens had shared their technology freely. Confident that primitive humans could never understand the complex physics involved, they had been very, very wrong. The beautiful thing, Samuel told his colleague Nina Torres, is that they handed us everything we needed. They were so convinced of our inferiority that they never imagined we might actually figure it out. Nina nodded grimly. She had lost her father to a Dreth raid when she was a child. Every equation she solved, every breakthrough she achieved was dedicated to his memory. They think we are stupid because we are young. They forget that young species have something the old ones have lost. What is that? Hunger. Nina looked at the test results on her screen, numbers that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. They have been comfortable for so long that they have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. We have never forgotten. On the diplomatic station, Marcus Webb watched the Volanthi ship dock with the same graceful arrogance he had witnessed so many times before. The aliens would come aboard, make their demands, and expect humanity to accept them with grateful smiles. They would never suspect that, behind those smiles, an entire species was counting down the days until everything changed. Ambassador Claire Donovan straightened her uniform and prepared to greet the delegation. She was humanity's mask, the pleasant face that hid the fury beneath. Every smile, every polite word, every humble acceptance of unfair terms brought them one day closer to the moment when the mask would finally come off. Remember, she told Marcus, as the airlock opened, we are the weak and harmless humans. We are grateful for any scraps they throw us. We would never dream of challenging the natural order of the galaxy. Marcus nodded, his own mask sliding into place. Of course, Ambassador. We know our place. But as the Volanthi delegation swept into the station, radiating the casual superiority of a species that had never known fear, Marcus allowed himself a single thought that he kept carefully hidden behind his humble expression. Your time is ending, and you do not even know it yet. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. It had confused patience for weakness, silence for acceptance, and humility for surrender. Humanity had endured 3 centuries of insults and attacks, and casual cruelty, waiting for the right moment to reveal what they truly were. That moment was coming. And when it arrived, the Galactic Council would finally understand that some species should never be underestimated. The countdown had begun. 20 years passed like a held breath. On the surface, nothing changed. Humanity continued to play its role as the galaxy's youngest and weakest species, accepting unfair treaties and bowing before the elder races. But beneath that surface, in the shadows where no one thought to look, something extraordinary was taking shape. Admiral Patricia Cole watched the progress reports scroll across her screen in the underground command center. Every month brought new successes. Weapons that could pierce Dreth armor. Ships that could outrun Volanthi cruisers. Soldiers trained to fight without fear against enemies twice their size. The galaxy thought humans were building farms and factories. They were building an army. Commander Daniel Shaw stood before his recruits on the frozen surface of Europa, its breath-forming clouds in the bitter cold. These men and women had volunteered for a training program that officially did not exist. They would become the first soldiers of a war that had not yet been declared. The Volanthi trained their warriors for 5 years, Daniel told them, his voice carrying across the icy plain. The Dreths spend 3 years preparing their soldiers for combat. We have 18 months. And when we are done, you will be better than any of them. A young woman named Sophie raised her hand. She was barely 20 years old, with the quiet determination that Daniel had learned to recognize in the best recruits. Sir, how is that possible? These species have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Daniel walked among them, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. Because they fight for territory and power and pride. They fight because it is what their ancestors did, and their ancestors before them. They have forgotten why wars truly matter. He stopped in front of Sophie, looking into her eyes. We fight because, if we lose, there will be no more humans. Our children, our families, our entire species will cease to exist. Tell me, soldier, which motivation do you think is stronger? Sophie straightened her back. Survival, sir. Exactly. There is nothing more dangerous in this universe than a human who has nothing left to lose. The Council and their allies are about to learn that lesson the hard way. Across the solar system, Dr. Samuel Price continued his secret research. The lunar facility had grown from a small laboratory to a sprawling complex. All hidden beneath the gray dust of the moon's surface, Council inspectors visited regularly, saw exactly what they expected to see, and left satisfied that humans were still decades away from any real technological progress. They never thought to look deeper. The shield modifications are complete, Samuel reported to his team. We have tripled the efficiency of the Valanthi design and made it completely resistant to their standard weapons. When they fire at our ships, they will be very surprised by the results. Nina Torres pulled up the test data on the main display. Years of work, countless sleepless nights, all leading to this moment. The weapon systems are ready as well. Kinetic accelerators that can punch through any armor in the galaxy. Energy projectors that make the Dreth plasma cannons look like children's toys. And they have no idea any of this exists. Samuel nodded slowly. He was not a violent man. He had become a scientist because he loved discovery and creation, not destruction. But the Dreth had taken that choice away from him. They had burned human colonies and laughed while children screamed. The Council had watched and done nothing. Now the same brilliant mind that had dreamed of exploring the stars would be turned to the grim business of war. How many platforms have been deployed? He asked. Nina checked her records. Over 10,000 weapon satellites hidden in asteroid fields and debris clouds across Council space. We have been launching them for years, disguised as mining probes and communication relays. Nobody looked twice at them, and the fleet. 73 warships assembled in pieces across a dozen systems. The constellation is complete and ready for deployment. The Endeavor and Horizon are running final tests. The rest will be operational within 6 months. Samuel allowed himself a small smile. The Council believed humanity had perhaps a dozen outdated patrol vessels to protect their colonies. They had no idea that hidden in the darkness between stars, a fleet powerful enough to challenge any force in the galaxy was waiting to be unleashed. On the diplomatic station, Ambassador Claire Donovan continued her delicate dance of deception. She attended council meetings, negotiated treaties that both sides knew were meaningless, and maintained the fiction of human cooperation. But every night, she transmitted encrypted reports to Admiral Cole, sharing every piece of intelligence she could gather. The Kethrani are unhappy with the Valanthi, Claire reported during one late-night transmission. The trade agreements are bleeding them dry. They are starting to question whether the Council truly serves their interests. Patricia studied the intelligence carefully. Potential allies. Not yet. They are too afraid of Council retaliation. But they are watching us carefully. If we show that it is possible to stand against the elder races and survive, others may find their courage and the Dreth. Claire's expression darkened. They are planning something big. My sources say they have assembled a fleet larger than anything they have used before. They are not satisfied with burning our outer colonies anymore. They want to send a message. Patricia felt the cold certainty settle in her chest. The moment they had been preparing for was approaching faster than expected. Do we know their target? Not yet. But it will be soon. Within the year, the message came 6 months later. The Dreth fleet had attacked New Helsinki, one of humanity's largest and most prosperous colonies. 400,000 people lived there, building lives and raising families in a city that had taken decades to construct. The attack lasted for hours. When it ended, nothing remained but ashes and silence. Admiral Cole stood in the command center, watching the emergency transmissions that had been intercepted before they were cut short. Screams of terror, desperate pleas for help, the sounds of a civilization being erased. Around her, officers and analysts worked in grim silence, their faces pale with shock and rage. The Galactic Council issued a statement expressing deep concern and calling for diplomatic dialogue. Patricia turned off the display. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, but something had changed in her eyes. The patience that had defined humanity's strategy for 20 years had finally reached its end. "Begin Operation Awakening," she said. "All units to deployment positions. This time, when the Dreth come for our people, they will find something they never expected." Kevin Marsh, now a full commander after years of service, looked at his admiral with a mixture of fear and hope. "Are we ready?" Patricia thought about the secret fleet waiting in the darkness. She thought about the weapons platforms hidden across council space. She thought about the soldiers trained to fight without fear and the scientists who had given humanity the tools to match any species in the galaxy. She had been ready for 20 years, she said. "We were just waiting for the right moment. And now that moment has arrived." Across human space, encrypted orders went out to every hidden base and secret facility. Engineers ran final checks on weapon systems that had never been fired in anger. Pilots boarded ships that officially did not exist. Soldiers said goodbye to families who had no idea what was about to happen. On Europa, Commander Daniel Shaw assembled his troops for the last time before deployment. They were no longer the uncertain recruits he had trained years ago. They were warriors, hardened by years of brutal preparation, ready to face any enemy. "Today, we stop hiding," Daniel told them. "Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. Some of us will not survive what is coming, but those who fall will be remembered as the ones who stood up when everyone else told us to kneel." Sophie, now a captain herself, stood at the front of the formation. Her eyes held the same cold determination that burned in every human heart. "We are ready, sir. Just give us a target." Daniel smiled grimly. "The Dreth are coming for Proxima Centauri. They expect to find another easy victory. Instead, they will find us waiting for them." The pieces were in place. The trap was set. And humanity, after 3 centuries of submission and 60 years of murder, was finally ready to show the galaxy what happened when the patient species finally said enough. The countdown was over. The war had begun. The Dreth fleet emerged from faster than light. Travel at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. 40 warships bristling with weapons that had burned 100 human colonies to ash. Commander Vorthax stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue world grow larger on his display screens. Another human settlement? Another easy victory? Another message sent to a species too weak to fight back. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. Arrive in overwhelming force, broadcast the standard ultimatum, and watch the humans scramble to evacuate before the bombardment began. Sometimes they managed to save a few thousand. Most of the time, they saved no one. Either way, the Dreth achieved their goal, reminding humanity of its proper place in the galaxy. "Open a channel to the colony," Vorthax ordered, his scaled hide gleaming under the harsh bridge lights. "Let them hear their fate." The communication officer obeyed, and Vorthax began his speech. "Attention, human colony. This is Commander Vorthax of the Dreth Confederacy. You have 1 hour to surrender and prepare for evacuation. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction. This is your only warning." Silence answered him. No desperate pleas, no calls for mercy, not even the usual pathetic attempts at negotiation. Just empty static from a world that should have been screaming. Vorthax felt a flicker of unease. Humans always responded. They begged and bargained and wept, because that was what weak species did when faced with superior force. This silence was wrong. Status of their defense fleet. He demanded. "Sensors show 3 patrol vessels in orbit," his tactical officer reported. "Standard human design? Minimal armament? No threat to our forces. Vorthax nodded slowly. Perhaps the humans had simply given up. Perhaps they had finally accepted the inevitable and chosen to face death with dignity. He would grant them that small mercy before he burned their world. Begin bombardment sequence, he ordered. Target all population centers. Weapons officers acknowledged and activated the targeting systems. And then, for the first time in his long career, Vorthax watched his entire tactical display dissolve into chaos. Commander. Targeting systems are not responding, the weapons officer reported, confusion thick in his voice. Something is interfering with our sensors. Before Vorthax could respond, space around his fleet came alive with fire. Admiral Patricia Cole watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Constellation. Humanity's hidden flagship. The ship was 3 times the size of any vessel the Council believed humans capable of building, armed with weapons that had never been used outside of testing ranges. Around her, officers coordinated the ambush with cold precision. All platforms engaging, reported Lieutenant Commander Grace Kim from the tactical station. Enemy shields are failing faster than projected. Patricia allowed herself a grim smile. For 20 years, they had seeded weapons platforms throughout this system, disguised as asteroids and debris. The Dreth had scanned the area many times, never suspecting that the rocks floating peacefully in space were anything but natural. Now those rocks were revealing their true purpose. Kinetic projectiles, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through Dreth armor like paper. The first 8 warships died in the opening 30 seconds of the battle, their shields useless against weapons they had never been designed to counter. Constellation and escort fleet engaging, Patricia ordered. All batteries fire at will. The hidden fleet emerged from behind the system's gas giant, where they had waited in perfect silence for days. Captain Henry Blake commanded the Endeavor. His crew, veterans of 100 simulated battles they had never expected to fight for real. Captain Sophie Kane led the Horizon, her youthful face hardened by years of preparation for this moment. The Dreth fleet, caught between the weapons platforms and the emerging human warships, tried to regroup. Vorthax screamed orders across the command channel, demanding his captains form a defensive formation. Concentrate fire on the largest human vessel. Do something to stem the tide of destruction sweeping through his forces. But the humans were not fighting like any enemy the Dreth had ever faced. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Their shields absorbed Dreth plasma fire without flickering. Their kinetic weapons punched through armored hulls as if they were made of glass. Captain Blake brought the Endeavor alongside a crippled Dreth cruiser, watching the enemy crew scramble to abandon ship. Secure the survivors, he ordered. We are not barbarians. We are not them. His first officer looked surprised. Sir, they burned New Helsinki. 400,000 people. I know exactly what they did. Blake's voice was hard, but controlled. And that is exactly why we will not do the same. We are fighting to prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars. We will not prove it by becoming the monsters they expected us to be. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, not a single Dreth ship remained operational. 23 had been destroyed outright, their crews killed in the fighting. 17 had been disabled and boarded, their survivors taken prisoner. Among those prisoners was Vorthax himself, dragged from his broken flagship by human marines who treated him with the same cold efficiency they had shown throughout the engagement. They brought him before Admiral Cole in the Constellation's secure briefing room. The Dreth commander towered over her, his scales still smoking from the electrical fires that had swept through his ship. Even in defeat, his eyes burned with hatred. You cannot win, Vorthax snarled. The Confederacy has 1,000 ships. The Council will never permit this aggression to stand. Patricia sat across from him, perfectly calm. The Council permitted you to slaughter our people for 60 years. They watched you burn our colonies and murder our children, and they did nothing but issue statements of concern. Their permission is no longer relevant to us. You are fools. When word of this reaches the homeworld, they will send everything they have. They will hunt your species to extinction. Patricia leaned forward slightly. We are counting on it. Vorthax's eyes narrowed. He was beginning to understand that he had badly underestimated these creatures. What do you want? Nothing from you. You are a prisoner of war, and you will be treated according to civilized standards that your people never showed to ours. But your leaders, your council allies, and everyone who allowed this situation to develop for 60 years, while our people died in silence, they are about to receive a message. She stood and walked to the viewport, where the wreckage of the Dreth fleet drifted in the void. For 300 years, humanity has been the quiet member of the galactic community. We accepted insults and unfair treaties and attacks on our colonies because we believed that patience and cooperation would eventually earn us respect. We were wrong. Patricia turned back to face her prisoner. The era of human submission is over. As of this moment, we are no longer asking to be treated as equals. We are telling the galaxy that we will accept nothing less. Any species that attacks human territory will face total retaliation. Any attempt by the Council to intervene militarily will be treated as a declaration of war. Vorthax stared at her in disbelief. You would challenge the entire Galactic Council? That is suicide, perhaps. But here's what you never understood about humans. Patricia's voice was quiet, almost gentle. We did not survive ice ages and plagues and world wars by being sensible. We survived by being too stubborn to die. And if the galaxy forces us to choose between extinction and fighting impossible odds, we will choose to fight every single time, within hours of the battle's conclusion. Humanity's ambassadors delivered identical messages to every member of the Galactic Council. The ultimatum was simple: accept humanity as full equals, recognize their territorial sovereignty and all support for the Dreth, and grant them a permanent seat on the High Council. The galaxy had 72 hours to respond. On her diplomatic station, Ambassador Claire Donovan watched the Council's emergency session dissolve into chaos as the elder races realized what had happened. For the first time in 4,000 years, a younger species had not only challenged their authority, but demonstrated the power to back up that challenge. They will come for us, Claire told her aide. Watching the Volanthi delegation argue with the Kathrani representatives, they will assemble every fleet they have and try to crush us before we grow any stronger. Her aide nodded nervously. Can we win? Claire smiled, the same cold smile that humanity had been hiding for 20 years. That depends on how you define winning. But I promise you this. Whatever happens next, the galaxy will never forget the day humanity finally said enough. The first shot had been fired. The message had been sent. And across known space, species who had never dared to challenge the old order watched with growing hope as the humans proved that the mighty could bleed the war for the future of the galaxy had truly begun. The Galactic Council had not faced a genuine crisis in 4,000 years. The last species to challenge their authority had been erased so completely that even their name had been forgotten. Their homeworld reduced to a barren rock as a warning to any who might follow their example. The elder races had grown comfortable in their power, confident that no one would ever dare to threaten the natural order they had built. Humanity was about to prove them wrong. High Arbiter. Melandrax of the Valenthea Empire stood before the emergency session, his bioluminescent crest pulsing with barely controlled fury. Around him, representatives from 100 species watched in silence, many of them unsure whether to be terrified or impressed by what the humans had accomplished. This is unprecedented aggression, Melandrax declared, his translated voice echoing through the great chamber. The humans have violated 17 treaties and murdered 12,000 Dreth warriors. They must be disciplined immediately before their defiance spreads to other species who might forget their place. Ambassador Claire Donovan sat in humanity's designated position, traditionally located in the back of the chamber where the youngest species could observe but rarely be heard. Today, she had moved to the center of the room, directly facing the High Arbiter. The other delegates had stared at her as she walked past them, some with anger, others with something that looked almost like admiration. Disciplined, Claire repeated, her voice calm and pleasant. That is an interesting choice of words, High Arbiter. I wonder if you used the same word when you discussed the Dreth attacks on our colonies. When they burned New Helsinki, When they massacred the settlers on Prosperity Station, when they murdered 400,000 of my people while the council did nothing but express concern, Melandrax's crest flickered with irritation. Those were regrettable incidents, Ambassador, but they were internal disputes outside the council's jurisdiction. The Dreth were exercising their traditional rights of territorial enforcement. Territorial enforcement. Claire stood slowly, her eyes never leaving the High Arbiter's face. Is that what you call the slaughter of civilians? The burning of cities? The extermination of entire communities for the crime of existing in space? The Dreth decided belonged to them. The humans established colonies in contested regions. They knew the risks. Those regions were assigned to us by this very council. Claire's voice hardened. We followed every rule. We signed every treaty. We accepted every limitation you placed upon us. And in return, you allowed our people to be murdered for 60 years while you watched and did nothing. The chamber had gone completely silent. No one interrupted a High Arbiter. No one spoke to the elder races with such open defiance. But Claire had stopped pretending to be humble 3 eons ago, and she had no intention of starting again. The humans have presented a list of demands, she continued, pulling up the document on the chamber's main display. Full recognition of our territorial sovereignty, reparations for the attacks we have endured, immediate dissolution of all treaty limitations on our military capacity, and a permanent seat on the High Council itself, with full voting rights. Melandrax laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the chamber. You overreach, Ambassador. Your little victory against the Dreth means nothing. The combined fleets of the Council could reduce your species to dust in a matter of weeks. We have tolerated your existence out of benevolence. Do not mistake that tolerance for inability. Claire smiled. Then let me show you something, High Arbiter. Something that might change your perspective. She activated her personal console, and the chamber's display systems suddenly shifted. Overriding Council security with embarrassing ease, star charts appeared, marking every major military installation across Council space. On each installation, a red dot began to glow.
Oh.
Those red markers, Claire explained as the delegates stared in growing horror, represent antimatter devices that we have placed within striking distance of your shipyards, your command centers, and your homeworlds. We have been deploying them for the past decade, hidden in cargo containers and debris fields and communication satellites that no one thought to examine carefully. The Valanthi representative from the military command leaped to his feet. That is impossible. Our security systems would have detected any such weapons. Your security systems were designed to detect threats from species you considered worthy of attention. Claire's smile widened slightly. We were just the harmless humans. Why would you scan our ships any more carefully than you would scan the maintenance drones that clean your station corridors? Melandrax's crest had gone pale, the bioluminescence fading as the implications sank in. You would destroy yourselves along with us. Mutual annihilation is not victory. No, it is not, Claire agreed. But here's what you have never understood about humanity, High Arbiter. We did not claw our way out of the mud and reach the stars by being reasonable. We did it by being stubborn enough to die for things that matter. We survived extinction events that should have ended our species. We overcame disasters that would have broken any sensible civilization. We kept fighting when every logical analysis said we should surrender. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species she had smiled at and bowed to for 20 years. Can you say the same? When was the last time any of you truly risked everything for something you believed in? When was the last time you faced a threat that you could not simply intimidate into submission? The Kathrani ambassador rose slowly, his multi-jointed limbs unfolding to their full, impressive height. You speak of mutual destruction as if it were acceptable. What guarantee do we have that you will not use these weapons regardless of our response? None. Claire shrugged. Just as we had no guarantee that the Dreth would stop killing our people. Just as we had no guarantee that this council would ever treat us fairly. You taught us that guarantees mean nothing in a galaxy where the strong do as they please and the weak suffer what they must. We are simply demonstrating that we are no longer willing to be weak. The Mortith delegate, a creature of shadow and angles that had remained silent throughout the session, finally spoke. What do you truly want, human? This display of force cannot be your end goal. Even with your hidden weapons, you cannot hope to defeat the combined might of the Council. Claire turned to face the Mordeth directly. We want to be left alone. We want to trade fairly and expand peacefully and raise our children without fear that they will be burned alive in their beds. We want to be treated as equals by species who have spent 3 centuries treating us as pets. That is all we have ever wanted. And if we refuse your demands, then the weapons activate. Every installation marked on that display vanishes in antimatter fire. Millions of your people die, including many of ours. The galaxy descends into chaos as the power structures you have built over thousands of years collapse overnight. Claire paused. And humanity dies too, eventually, but we take you with us. And in the end, neither of us gets what we want. She looked directly at Melandrax. Or we can choose differently. You can recognize that the old order has failed. That a galaxy built on the domination of younger species by elder ones was never going to last forever. You can accept us as partners instead of subjects. You can help us build something better than what came before. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed her words. For the first time in 4,000 years, the Galactic Council was being forced to genuinely negotiate instead of simply dictating terms. Melandrax conferred quietly with his advisors, his crest cycling through colors that Claire did not recognize. Other delegations huddled together, exchanging urgent whispers in languages that the translation systems rendered as buzzing static. Finally, the High Arbiter stepped forward. His crest had stabilized to a neutral blue, his posture less aggressive than before. The Council will recess for 6 hours to consider the human demands, he announced. All delegations will remain in the chamber complex until a decision is reached. As the delegates filed out, the Kathrani ambassador paused beside Claire. You have changed everything today, he said quietly. Win or lose, the galaxy will never be the same. Claire nodded slowly. That was always the plan. 6 hours later, the council reconvened. Melandrax read the official response in a flat monotone, his earlier arrogance completely absent. All human demands were accepted, pending final treaty negotiations. Humanity would receive its seat on the High Council. The Dreth would be ordered to pay reparations and sign a permanent peace agreement. All limitations on human military capacity would be removed. Claire listened to the terms with a calm expression, betraying none of the fierce triumph burning in her chest. 20 years of preparation, 60 years of suffering, 300 years of quiet endurance. It all led to this moment. Humanity had won without firing another shot. As she left the chamber, she sent a brief encrypted message to Admiral Cole. Terms accepted. Phase 1 complete. The response came seconds later. Understood. Begin Phase 2. Build the alliance. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. 10 years had passed since the Proxima Declaration, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. Admiral Patricia Cole sat in her garden on the Pacific coast of what had once been California. Watching her grandchildren play in the surf, the sound of their laughter drifted up the hillside, mixing with the cry of seabirds and the gentle roar of the ocean. It was a peaceful sound, the sound of a world that no longer lived in fear. She was 70 years old now, tired from active service, but never truly free of the memories. Sometimes, late at night, she still saw the emergency transmissions from New Helsinki, still heard the screams of 400,000 people dying while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Those memories would never fade completely, but they were balanced now by other memories, better ones. Of the day humanity had finally stood up and demanded to be treated as equals. Commander Marcus Webb had become Admiral Webb, the first human to serve on the Council's peacekeeping command. His fleet patrolled the borders between civilizations, maintaining order not through intimidation, but through genuine respect. Species that had once dismissed humans as primitives now sought their counsel on matters of diplomacy and conflict resolution. Patricia smiled at the thought. Marcus had always believed that humanity's true strength lay not in weapons, but in the stubborn refusal to accept that things could never get better. He had been right. On the diplomatic station that had once been the site of so many humiliating negotiations, Counselor Claire Donovan addressed the annual assembly of the Galactic Council. She was no longer Ambassador Donovan, forced to sit in the back and accept whatever scraps the elder races threw her way. She was a full member of the High Council itself, her voice equal to any other in the chamber. 10 years ago, humanity said enough, Claire said, looking out at the assembled delegates. Many of them were the same species who had watched humans suffer for 60 years without lifting a finger to help. Some still resented the upstart civilization that had rewritten galactic politics in a single generation. But more and more, they were coming to accept that the old order had needed to change. We meant it then, and we mean it now. But enough does not end. Ian, isolation. It does not mean conquest. It does not mean revenge. It means partnership, built on mutual respect and genuine equality. The Kathrani ambassador listened intently. His species had been among the first to join what the press called the human sphere of influence, an alliance of younger civilizations that had suffered under the old order and now worked together to build something better. The Mordath had followed, along with a dozen smaller species who had never dared to dream of standing against the elder races. We extend our hand to any species willing to meet us as equals, Claire continued. And we make this promise, as long as humanity has a voice in this council. No species, no matter how small or young or seemingly powerless, will ever be abandoned the way we were. The applause that followed was not universal. High Arbiter Melandrax and the Velanthi delegation remained silent, their bioluminescent crests dark with suppressed resentment. They had never forgiven humanity for humiliating them on the galactic stage, for proving that their ancient power was not as absolute as they had believed. But they no longer dared to act on that resentment. The balance of power had shifted too dramatically, and even the proudest elder race understood that the universe had changed. In the research facilities of Luna, Dr. Samuel Price received the Galactic Science Medal for his work on shield technology. The ceremony was held in the same complex where he had spent 15 years developing weapons in secret, and the irony was not lost on him. The knowledge that had been created for war was now being shared freely, used to protect civilian vessels and improve life across a dozen worlds. Nina Torres stood beside him, receiving her own medal for advances in faster-than-light communication. Their work had revolutionized interstellar diplomacy, making it possible for species separated by vast distances to negotiate in real time instead of waiting months for messages to travel between stars. We did not win because we were stronger, Samuel told the assembled dignitaries in his acceptance speech. We won because we refused to accept that the universe was inherently unfair. Humans look at the impossible and ask why not. That is our gift and our burden. The Dreth Confederacy still existed, but as a shadow of its former power. Their new government had signed treaties guaranteeing human security, paid reparations to the families of the fallen, accepted the same limitations they had once imposed on others. It was not revenge. Revenge would have meant their extinction. And humanity had seriously considered that option in the dark days after New Helsinki. Instead, it was something more lasting. A reminder that the galaxy had rules now. And those rules applied to everyone equally. Commander Daniel Shaw, now captain of the Horizon, led his crew through the outer reaches of explored space. They were no longer soldiers preparing for a war they hoped would never come. They were explorers, charting new systems and making contact with species who had never heard of the Galactic Council or the conflicts that had shaped it. Sophie Kane served as his first officer. The same young recruit who had once asked how humans could possibly match species with thousands of years of experience. She had found her answer in the fire of battle and the patient work of building peace. New system on sensors, she reported as the Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Multiple habitable planets. Signs of primitive civilization on the third world. Daniel studied the readings carefully. First contact protocols had been refined considerably over the past decade, informed by humanity's own experience with species who had seen them as inferior. They would approach carefully, respectfully, offering friendship without demanding submission. Begin standard observation, he ordered. Let us see who our new neighbors are. Back on Earth, in a small town in Kansas. A teacher named Margaret Collins asked her students what they wanted to be when they grew up. The classroom was filled with children of various ages, their faces bright with the limitless optimism of youth. A girl named Lucy raised her hand. "I want to be a starship captain. I want to explore new worlds and make friends with aliens." 20 years ago, that dream would have seemed impossible for a human child. The galaxy had been too dangerous, too hostile, too indifferent to human ambitions. Now it was just another Tuesday, another ordinary day in a civilization that had refused to accept its assigned place in the universe. Margaret smiled at her student. "That sounds like a wonderful goal, Lucy. Work hard, study well, and maybe one day you will command your own ship." "Do you think we will ever find species we have not met before?" another student asked. "Ones who are really different from anyone in the council?" "I am certain of it," Margaret replied. "The universe is vast beyond imagining. We have barely begun to explore it. Who knows what wonders are waiting out there for someone brave enough to go looking?" In the council chambers, Claire finished her speech and took her seat among the other counselors. The session continued with the ordinary business of galactic governance. Disputes and trade agreements and the endless negotiations that kept 100 civilizations from falling into chaos. It was tedious work, far less dramatic than the moment when humanity had revealed its hidden weapons and demanded to be heard. But Claire understood that the real victory was not the Proxima Declaration or the Council's surrender. The real victory was this: the slow, patient work of building a galaxy, where no species had to fear extinction for the crime of being young and weak. Admiral Cole closed her eyes and listened. To the sound of her grandchildren playing in the surf, the war was over. The old order had fallen, and humanity, that stubborn, impossible species that had refused to die, had finally found its place among the stars. But the journey was not complete. It would never be complete. There would always be new challenges, new threats, new species that needed protection, and new systems to explore. That was the nature of the universe, and humanity had learned to embrace it, somewhere in the void between stars. On a ship named Horizon, Captain Daniel Shaw smiled at his crew as they prepared for their next mission. The endless journey into the unknown continued, one star at a time. The galaxy had finally learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that has survived everything the universe could throw at it. Humanity had said enough, and the universe had listened. Now they were writing the next chapter of their story, a chapter that would stretch across centuries and galaxies, a story of exploration and discovery and the endless human refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The stars were waiting, and humanity at long last was ready to claim them.